I used to think my life was exactly what it looked like from the outside. Comfortable, loving, safe. Our house always smelled like fresh coffee and lavender. Family photos filled every wall, and Victor's laugh used to make the whole place feel alive. He was my best friend, my calm, my forever. He held me when I broke down, brought me tulips in winter, and whispered promises that felt real. But lately, something in the air had shifted. The warmth started slipping away, quietly, like steam off a cooling cup. At first, I tried to explain it to myself. Work stress, maybe. He'd been talking about that new campaign at the office nonstop. But then came the late nights, the weekend errands that popped up out of nowhere, the way his screen would go black the second I walked in. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Every couple goes through phases, right? Still, I felt the distance growing between us, and I couldn't ignore it. Something wasn't right, and deep down, I knew it. I didn't mean to snoop. I swear I didn't. He'd left his tablet on the kitchen counter, and I was just going to check a recipe I'd saved. That's when it happened. One swipe, one stupid swipe. And there it was, open messages. At first I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing, but as I kept reading, my hands started to shake. Flirty texts, pictures, and then her name, Juliana, my cousin, my blood. I couldn't breathe. My ears were ringing, and my heart felt like it had dropped straight through the floor. I kept scrolling, hoping, praying that somehow I was wrong. Maybe it was some sick joke, some weird misunderstanding. But no, there she was, sending him photos I wish I could erase from my mind. And there he was, calling her things he used to say to me. My hands were ice cold. I just stood there, staring, the kitchen spinning around me like I was in someone else's nightmare. It wasn't just the betrayal of a husband. It was the betrayal of someone who'd shared my childhood, who used to braid my hair and cry with me at Grandma's funeral. Juliana and I were close, like sisters. I'd let her into my home, into my heart. And now she was in my bed, in my life, stealing the one person I thought I could count on. The worst part? Neither of them knew I'd found out. They were still out there, lying, laughing behind my back like nothing had changed, like I was the fool. And I was, at least for a moment. I wanted to scream, to throw that tablet through the window, to drive to her house and tear down every wall. But I didn't. I didn't cry, not even a little, because something inside me clicked. Cold, steady. I wasn't going to break down. No, I was going to break them. Not with shouting or drama, but with precision, with silence, with a plan. I started watching them, closely, quietly. Every excuse he made, every shift in his tone, every flicker in his eyes when her name came up. I took mental notes like a surgeon studying before an operation. No one suspected a thing. I still smiled, cooked dinner, kissed him goodnight. He thought he was safe. She thought she'd won. Neither of them saw what was coming. And honestly, that made it all the more satisfying. I wasn't planning revenge. I was building it. But let me tell you something. It hurt. Every second. Sometimes I'd stand in the shower just to hide the sound of my own breathing, because I couldn't afford to break. I'd run my fingers along the sink, remembering all the mornings we shared there, brushing our teeth, making stupid faces in the mirror. The memories felt like paper cuts, small, constant stings I couldn't stop reliving. But I refused to let those wounds turn into scars that belonged to them. They didn't get to define my story. So I made a choice, not to collapse, not to confront, but to control. I wouldn't scream. I would smile. I wouldn't beg. I would lead. And soon I found the perfect way to begin. A little lie, harmless at first glance, a spark that would light the fire beneath their feet. And it all started with two simple words. I'm pregnant. I'd never lied like that before. not about something so big, so loaded with consequence. But that morning, I looked him straight in the eyes, let my lower lip tremble just a little, and whispered, "Victor, I'm pregnant." His face froze, like someone had pressed pause on the man I used to know. And for a second, I swear, I saw guilt flash across his features before he masked it with forced joy. He wrapped me in his arms, too tight, too fast. I could feel his heartbeat. It wasn't excitement. It was panic. He said all the right things. "Wow, really? That's amazing. We're gonna be okay, baby." But his hands were cold. His voice cracked on the word, "we." I knew exactly what was going through his mind. How do I keep this from Juliana? And that's exactly where I wanted him. Cornered, tangled, afraid to make a wrong move. I acted like I believed him, like I was floating on a cloud of baby bliss. And the best part? He didn't suspect a thing. By dinner, the news had traveled. I accidentally left the ultrasound printout, totally fake, on the fridge, right next to our grocery list. My sister screamed when she saw it. My mom cried. Victor stood there, smiling like a man walking through fire in a silk suit. But the real fun began when Juliana found out. She texted me a single word. "Seriously?" I didn't reply. I didn't have to. That silence said everything. And oh, how she hated that. She started slipping, almost immediately. You could feel the tension in every word she spoke around me. Tight, brittle, like a woman holding her breath. At a family brunch, she barely looked at me. When she finally did, her smile was a cracked plate, all edges and no warmth. Victor tried to act normal, but I could see it. The way his leg bounced under the table. The way he avoided eye contact. I watched them like a hawk. Every glance, every twitch, every lie layered over another. At home, Victor was different. He hovered, asked too many questions, offered to cook, to clean, to run to the store for snacks I hadn't even craved. I played the glowing mom-to-be, rubbing my belly, humming lullabies, flipping through baby name books just loud enough for him to hear. And when I caught him staring, I'd give him this soft, dreamy smile. It was all theater. But I was the star, the director, and the script was mine. He had no idea he was already in the second act of a play he never auditioned for. Meanwhile, Juliana was spiraling. She called him constantly, and when he thought I was asleep, he'd answer in whispers. Angry whispers. I made a habit of getting up for a glass of water just in time to accidentally overhear them. "What do you want me to do, Juliana?" he hissed one night. "She's pregnant. What do you expect me to do?" I slipped back into bed and smiled in the dark. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about control, about showing them both exactly who they underestimated. I started staging little moments, just enough to make everything feel more real. I set alarms for fake doctor visits and came back waving ultrasound updates I'd designed myself. I even bought prenatal vitamins and left the bottle half open on the bathroom counter. Victor would ask how the baby was doing, and I'd touch my belly gently, eyes shining. "Growing fast," I'd say, and I'd watch as his soul quietly unraveled. He was trapped in a lie he couldn't control, and I made sure the walls kept closing in. I knew exactly how to play it. Sweet. Innocent. Overflowing with maternal joy. I baked cookies for the neighbors, wore flowing dresses, even started a Pinterest board called Baby Love. The irony tasted sweeter than sugar. Juliana, on the other hand, was losing her grip. She stopped showing up to family events, but when she did, she looked like a shadow of herself. Restless, snappy, brittle. And I just kept smiling. Being the woman everyone adored. The mother-to-be with a heart of gold. But the best part? No one knew I was watching. Listening. Gathering every scrap of their mess while they drowned in it. I wasn't done yet, not even close. The storm hadn't hit. Not really. I was just turning up the pressure, slowly, like tightening a lid on a boiling pot. And soon, I'd make sure it exploded, exactly when and where I wanted. Things got tight, tense, the kind of tense you can feel in your teeth. Every morning, Victor would kiss me goodbye with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, and every evening, he came home more worn, more twisted up inside. I kept the act going, of course. "The baby and I missed you," I'd whisper, curling into his side like everything was perfect. And he'd nod, say something soft, but I could hear it, the crack in his voice. He was breaking, and I was right there to watch it happen. I started creating little moments of proof. One day I left a folded ultrasound photo in his briefcase with a note, "Can't wait to meet our little miracle." Another day I texted him a video of a fake heartbeat playing through my phone, tears in my eyes, thanking him for being my rock. He didn't respond right away. When he did, it was just a thumbs-up emoji. That's when I knew he was drowning. Juliana was pulling from one side, I was dragging from the other, and he couldn't keep both lies above water. They fought constantly now. I knew because I made sure they did. I'd accidentally leave bits of confusing info where Juliana might find them, an appointment time that didn't match up, a receipt for prenatal tea Victor never bought me. He started getting sloppy, snappy, caught between guilt and survival. And I played dumb. I cried when I needed to, laughed when it mattered. I was the picture of grace under pressure, and all the while, I kept turning the screws, just a little tighter each day. Juliana started texting me again. At first, little jabs disguised as concern. "How are you feeling? Must be exhausting." Then came the snide remarks. "Hope Victor's stepping up as a father." I never replied. Silence was my weapon, and she was bleeding from every unspoken word. I knew she was cracking. Her ego couldn't take being ignored. And Victor, poor Victor, was caught in a minefield of his own making. Every lie he told now had to align with mine. One misstep, and everything would blow. At a Sunday family dinner, I orchestrated my masterpiece. I stood at the head of the table, a glowing smile on my face, hand gently resting on my belly. "This little one," I said, voice trembling just enough, "reminds me every day that life is about second chances, forgiveness, loyalty, and the gift of new beginnings." My mother wiped a tear. My sister toasted to my strength. And across the table, Victor and Juliana looked like ghosts trapped in daylight. Their faces drained, lips tight, eyes darting, caught. I looked at them and almost laughed. They had no idea how much I knew, how much I'd planned. Every moment they shared, I was there. Every stolen text, every lie whispered between sheets. I was the shadow they didn't see. And now, they were the ones pretending. Faking smiles, faking peace. Meanwhile, I was building a truth so sharp it could slice them both open when the time was right. And oh, that time was getting close. I could feel it, the collapse coming. Victor barely spoke to me unless prompted. When he did, his voice was cautious, like stepping through broken glass. Juliana stopped showing up altogether, and when she did call, it was always with urgency. Panic. She was unraveling faster than he was. And I just kept smiling. I'd rub my stomach at the perfect moments, let people fawn over me, ask me baby names, give me gifts. I became untouchable, sacred. No one lies to a glowing mother, not without consequence. I started dreaming about it, the moment I'd finally let it all spill. What it would look like, what I'd wear, how their faces would fall. I didn't want revenge that screamed. I wanted revenge that whispered, that slid in under their skin and stayed there. Something unforgettable, something public, something they'd never live down. But it had to be perfect. The timing, the crowd, the reveal. I could feel it boiling under the surface, and I wasn't about to lift the lid until it was ready to erupt. So I waited, watched, listened. Let them believe, even just for a little longer, that they still had control, that they might still get away with it. But deep inside, I was already planning the moment the curtain would rise. And when it did, oh, they would both wish they'd never met me. Because the truth wasn't just coming. I was going to deliver it myself, with a bow on top. I picked the day carefully. A family reunion. How poetic. My mother insisted on throwing a baby shower at the same time, and I didn't stop her. In fact, I helped plan it. Baked cookies, wrapped favors, smiled for every photo. It was the perfect storm. Relatives from out of town, lifelong friends, and enough decorations to make it all feel festive. I wore a soft blue dress, the one Victor used to say made me glow. And I did glow, just not for the reason anyone thought. Victor looked like hell. Dark circles, nervous laugh, overcompensating with jokes and forced affection. Juliana? She almost didn't come, but she did. She walked in late, hair too perfect, smile too tight, and when she saw me standing next to Victor, hand on my belly, her eyes twitched with something between rage and fear. I welcomed her like a sister, hugged her, whispered, "So glad you made it." The truth was, I wouldn't have done it without her there. This moment was meant for both of them. People were everywhere, drinking punch, laughing, celebrating a baby that didn't exist. I let it build. Let the joy bubble up until the air practically crackled with it. I walked from table to table, soaking it all in, the compliments, the blessings, the innocent belief. Then I tapped my glass gently, 3 times. The room quieted, all eyes on me. I smiled, holding the printed sonogram in one hand and a stack of paper in the other. And in that silence, I felt calm. More calm than I'd felt in months. I took a breath and started with the story everyone expected. How grateful I was, how much the support meant, how excited Victor and I were to welcome this miracle. I saw heads nodding, a few people dabbing their eyes. Juliana had her arms crossed, barely blinking. Victor stood beside me, frozen. He didn't know what was coming, but something in his gut must have started to twist. Then I paused, held the sonogram up high. "I have a confession," I said. "There is no baby." Gasps. A glass clinked to the floor. Someone whispered, "What?" I let the silence stretch like a rubber band pulled tight. "But there is something else," I continued, voice steady, eyes locked on Juliana. "There is betrayal, from a man I shared my life with, and from a woman I once called my sister." I turned to Victor. "You can look away if you want, but this part is yours." And then I held up the printouts, screenshots of messages, timestamps, pictures. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I watched the color drain from his face, watched Juliana's mask crack in real time. Her lips parted like she wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. Not with the proof hanging in the air like smoke from a fire she started herself. The room was dead silent. My aunt covered her mouth. My cousin stood up, furious. And I just stood there, calm as a candle in a hurricane. Because this wasn't chaos. This was clarity. This was the moment I had crafted with care, and it was hitting exactly where I wanted it to. Victor tried to speak. He stammered, reached out like that would somehow undo everything I'd just laid bare. "Karen, please, But I shook my head gently. I wasn't here to argue. I wasn't here to listen. Juliana's eyes were glassy, her hands trembling as she tried to explain it away. "It wasn't like that. It just happened. You don't understand." But I understood more than they ever thought I could, and I made sure they saw it, that I wasn't broken. I was done. People began to shift in their seats, whispering. Some stared at Victor with disgust. Others looked away in disbelief. A few people actually got up and left. The air in that room had changed. No more streamers and cake and fake joy. Just the raw, ugly truth standing under the baby banner like a final, bitter joke. I took off the little corsage someone had pinned on me earlier and laid it on the table. My last gesture. My quiet mic drop. And with that, I stepped away from center stage. But not before looking over my shoulder, just once. Because that moment, that wasn't the end. Not for me. It was just the start of something else. Something cleaner, sharper, stronger. I walked out of that house with nothing but my purse and my peace. And behind me? They were left to deal with the wreckage they created. Together. No longer a secret, no longer protected. Just two people exposed in the light they tried so hard to avoid. But I wasn't done rising. Not yet. The fallout was immediate. Victor moved out 2 days later. Well, more like vanished. Left behind a pile of unopened mail, some of his clothes, and the scent of cologne I used to love. The whispers spread like wildfire. At the grocery store, people looked twice. At church, they avoided eye contact, or stared a little too long. Juliana went into hiding, supposedly traveling to clear her head. But everyone knew. Our family had a way of holding on to betrayal like an heirloom, and this one was going to be passed around for years. Their fairy tale fell apart fast. Without the thrill of sneaking around, they were just two broken people who ruined a good woman for nothing. I heard through the grapevine that they were fighting constantly, that Juliana accused him of ruining her life. That Victor started drinking more, sleeping less. They tried to paint me as the villain, of course, said I was manipulative, cruel. But here's the thing. Nobody believed them, because when the truth comes out in broad daylight, lies don't stand a chance. And me? I didn't fall apart. I filed for divorce with my head held high. No drama, no tears, just quiet certainty. I went back to school. I joined a women's group. I started writing again. At first, it was just journaling, late at night with a cup of tea and the house finally silent. But soon, it became something bigger. People wanted to hear my story. Women reached out. Some cried. Some laughed. All of them saw themselves in me. And that connection, it rebuilt me, piece by piece. I started living again, not just existing in the shell of a woman who'd been betrayed. I changed my hair, redecorated the house, gave away every single thing that reminded me of them. I even got rid of the couch where I once cried myself to sleep, replacing it with one so bright and bold it made me feel alive just looking at it. My mornings became mine again. Coffee in hand, sunlight on my face, no tension hanging in the air like a ghost. And the silence? It became peace, not punishment. People started treating me differently. Not with pity, but with respect. The kind that sticks. Friends I hadn't heard from in years reached out. Strangers at events whispered, "You're that woman from the story, right?" I never flinched. I never looked away. Because yes, I was her. The woman who turned devastation into power. I wasn't just surviving. I was building something. Something unshakable. I started consulting, speaking, helping others reclaim their stories. Because mine wasn't unique. But it was proof that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means transforming. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wonder if Victor ever truly understood what he lost. Not just me, but the version of himself he destroyed. Same with Juliana. Maybe she thought she'd won something, but in the end, all she did was strip herself bare in front of everyone who used to love her. I don't hate them. Not anymore. They gave me the fire I needed to burn down the old version of my life. And in its place, I built something stronger. I walk differently now. Shoulders back, steps steady. Not because I'm trying to prove anything, but because I don't have to. The weight that once clung to me like a second skin is gone. People still talk, sure. They whisper. They speculate. They wonder what I'll do next. And honestly, let them. Because I know who I am now. Not someone's wife. Not someone's second choice. I am the woman who looked heartbreak in the face and didn't blink. I'm writing my story, not just metaphorically. A memoir, maybe. A cautionary tale. Or maybe just a love letter to the version of me that refused to disappear. It's funny. They thought they broke me. They thought I'd fade into bitterness, into silence. But instead, I found my voice, and I used it. Not to scream, but to speak clearly. Loud enough for every other woman walking through betrayal to hear, "You are not done. You are becoming." And that's the truth they'll never escape. Victor and Juliana can have their shame, their silence, their shattered illusion. I have something better: freedom, self-respect, a future that's finally truly mine. And as I step forward, heels clicking against the pavement, wind catching the edge of my coat, I don't look back. Because what's behind me burned, and what's ahead, it's wide open, bright, and it belongs to me.
Your coding standards are obsolete. It's time for someone who understands modern architecture. Austin's words sliced through the conference room, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. My colleagues averted their eyes, as if watching someone's public execution. 15 years of dedication reduced to a single humiliating dismissal in front of the entire engineering team at NetSpan Analytics. I could feel the heat rising to my cheeks, but I kept my expression neutral. The termination papers slid across the polished oak table toward me, Austin's manicured fingernails tapping impatiently on the wood. Instead of protesting, I simply nodded, collected the document, and rose from my seat. "Do you have anything to say for yourself, Geraldine?" Austin asked, his voice dripping with false concern for the benefit of our audience. "No, thank you for the opportunity," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I gathered my belongings, turned on my heel, and walked out of the conference room with my head held high. My name is Geraldine Knox. I'm 53 years old, and until 20 minutes ago, I was the senior software architect at NetSpan Analytics in Columbus, Ohio. For 15 years, I've been the backbone of this operation, developing the custom database framework that powers everything from client data warehousing to analytics delivery for hundreds of enterprise clients. As I packed my belongings into a cardboard box, memories flooded back. Late nights debugging critical systems, weekend work sessions to meet impossible deadlines, and the countless innovations that had turned a struggling startup into a powerhouse in the SaaS industry. Each item I placed in the box represented years of dedication to a company I believed in. Douglas, one of the junior developers I'd mentored, lingered awkwardly by my desk. "This isn't right, Geraldine. They can't just—" "It's okay," I interrupted gently. "Things change. Companies evolve. But your database architecture is the backbone of everything we do here," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder to ensure Austin wasn't within earshot. I smiled, a genuine one this time. "Yes, it certainly is. What Austin Merrick didn't know, what he never bothered to research before his dramatic power play, was that I had developed NetSpan's proprietary database structure under a separate consulting agreement during the company's early years. Back then, they couldn't afford to hire me full-time, so we arranged a contract that explicitly stated I retained licensing rights to the architecture unless purchased outright, which never happened. As I walked toward the elevator, box in hand, I felt oddly calm. I had built NetSpan's foundation brick by brick, and now Austin was about to learn what happens when you kick away the cornerstone without checking if it's load-bearing first. I'd been with NetSpan Analytics since before it was even called NetSpan. Back in 2008, when James Holloway approached me with his vision for a revolutionary data analytics platform, the company consisted of 3 people working out of a renovated garage. James had the business concept, but needed someone who could build a database architecture capable of handling massive datasets while delivering lightning-fast analytics. "We can't afford to hire you full-time yet," James had admitted during our first meeting. "But I know your work from Trevanta Corp. You're exactly who we need." We drafted a consulting agreement that allowed me to develop the database architecture while maintaining my intellectual property rights. Paragraph 17, subsection C specified that I retained full licensing rights to the underlying framework unless NetSpan purchased those rights explicitly, a provision James agreed to without hesitation, promising to revisit once they secured their Series A funding. As NetSpan grew, that promise faded. Series A funding came and went, followed by Series B, then a successful IPO. James eventually moved on to become chairman of the board, leaving day-to-day operations to a succession of CEOs who knew nothing about my arrangement. The licensing agreement became buried in the company archives, forgotten by everyone, except me. I never pressed the issue because I loved my job. I expanded and refined the database architecture over the years, turning it into a seamless system that handled everything from data ingestion to visualization. My work became so integrated into NetSpan's operations that few people understood how deeply my code was embedded in every aspect of the company's offerings. Then, Austin Merrick arrived 6 months ago, bringing a wave of disruption with him. At 34, he was the youngest director of engineering in the company's history, recruited from a trendy Silicon Valley startup with promises of modernizing our legacy systems. In meetings, he spoke in a constant stream of buzzwords: microservices, blockchain integration, serverless architecture, while dismissing the robust systems that had served our clients reliably for years. "We need to pivot toward a more agile framework," became his mantra, though he never specified what that meant. I tried to work with him, explaining the elegant complexity of our database structure and how it could be evolved without the risks of a complete overhaul. But Austin saw my caution as resistance, my experience as obstinance. In his eyes, I represented the old guard, a barrier to his vision of transformation. "The tech industry waits for no one, Geraldine," he told me during our last one-on-one meeting, barely looking up from his phone. "Either adapt or get out of the way." I never imagined he'd make the choice for me, but perhaps it was inevitable from the moment he walked through NetSpan's doors. The house felt unusually quiet when I arrived home that afternoon. I placed my box of belongings on the kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of wine, then settled into my favorite armchair to process what had just happened. 15 years of my professional life had ended in less than 15 minutes. My phone buzzed repeatedly, messages from concerned colleagues expressing their shock and support. I appreciated their sentiment but wasn't ready to respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and navigated to my personal cloud storage, where I kept copies of all my important documents. The consulting agreement from 2008 was right where I'd left it, alongside meticulous documentation of my intellectual property contributions over the years. I read through the contract again, confirming what I already knew. The licensing provisions were crystal clear, drafted by an attorney who specialized in technology intellectual property. According to Section 29, if my employment were terminated, the company would have 30 days to either purchase the full license or negotiate continued use of the architecture. Without either action, the system would automatically revert to evaluation mode, limiting functionality until licensing was resolved. I'd built this failsafe into the core framework, not as a trap, but as protection for a scenario I hoped would never materialize. The mechanism was documented in the technical specifications I'd submitted to NetSpan years ago, though I doubted anyone in the current leadership had read them. My phone rang, displaying James Holloway's name. I hesitated before answering. "Geraldine, what the hell happened? I just heard from Patricia in Human Resources." James and I had drifted apart over the years as he focused on board-level responsibilities, but we still maintained a cordial relationship. "Austin decided my services were no longer required," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Said my coding standards were obsolete." James swore under his breath. "That's absolute nonsense. Did you remind him about the licensing agreement? No, I didn't. He made his decision quite publicly, in front of the entire team. It didn't seem like the appropriate time to bring up contract details. There was a long pause. Geraldine, you realize what this means for the company? I do. Better than anyone. What are you planning to do? I took a sip of wine, considering my response. Nothing, James. Absolutely nothing. The system will do exactly what it was programmed to do when the licensing verification runs on Saturday. I'm simply going to let events unfold naturally. Austin has no idea, does he? He never asked, never reviewed the architecture documentation, never consulted with anyone who understood the foundation of the systems he's so eager to replace. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. His first big move is scheduled for Saturday morning, a system-wide update that he claims will revolutionize our processing capabilities. Perfect timing, wouldn't you say? James sighed heavily. This is going to be a disaster. Yes, I agreed. It certainly will be. After hanging up, I sat quietly, watching the sunset through my living room window. I felt no joy in what was about to happen, only a profound sense of disappointment that it had come to this. Saturday morning, I woke up early despite having nowhere to be. 15 years of 6 o'clock alarms had conditioned my body to rise with the sun, regardless of circumstances. I made coffee and brought my laptop to the kitchen table, not to check on NetSpan. I didn't need to, but to update my resume. At precisely 7 a.m., Austin's scheduled system update would begin. By 7:30 a.m., when the licensing verification routine ran its regular weekly check, NetSpan's entire platform would grind to a halt. No data queries, no client dashboards, no reports. Just a simple error message. License validation failed. I wondered how long it would take them to understand the problem. The error message was deliberately generic, designed to appear as a routine system check rather than a licensing enforcement mechanism. The technical logs would contain more specific information, but would anyone at NetSpan know where to look? At 7:45 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed Douglas's number. Geraldine, thank goodness you answered. We're in complete meltdown mode here. Nothing's working. His voice was strained, the background noise suggesting chaos. What happened? I asked, feigning ignorance. Austin pushed his big update this morning, and now the entire system is down. Every client is getting error messages. The support lines are jammed. Austin's blaming the database architecture, saying your code must have failed. Of course he was. I see. He's got everyone searching through your documentation, but nobody understands it like you do. Is there any chance? I'm sorry, Douglas. I'm no longer employed by NetSpan. I can't help. My tone was gentle, but firm. But you built this system. You're the only one who... Douglas, I interrupted. This isn't your problem to solve. Trust me on that. After hanging up, I took a deep breath. Part of me felt guilty about the junior developers like Douglas caught in the crossfire, but they would weather this storm. It wasn't about them. By 9 a.m., the calls were increasing in frequency and desperation. I let most go to voicemail, but answered when I saw James's number. The board is convening an emergency meeting, he said without preamble. Austin is trying to paint this as a catastrophic failure of your database architecture rather than a licensing issue. Does he even understand it's a licensing issue? I asked. No. Nobody's figured that out yet. They're still treating it as a technical failure. I nodded to myself. They will eventually. The error is logged clearly for anyone who knows where to look. Geraldine, what do you want out of this? What's your endgame here? I considered his question carefully. Recognition, respect, compensation for years of undervalued work, and yes, a formal apology for how I was dismissed. Put together your terms. I'll make sure they're presented to the board. By noon, my email inbox contained frantic messages from nearly every executive at NetSpan, including Austin himself. His message was particularly telling. Whatever you did to sabotage our systems, we will hold you legally responsible. This kind of vindictive action is exactly why we needed to move beyond your outdated approaches. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I contacted Patricia Winters, a technology attorney I'd consulted years ago when drafting the original agreement. Within an hour, she had reviewed the contract and confirmed what I already knew. I was on solid legal ground. They don't have a leg to stand on, Patricia assured me. Your licensing rights are explicitly protected, and the termination clause is crystal clear. If anything, they're the ones in potential legal jeopardy for using your intellectual property without proper licensing after your termination. By 2 p.m., the CTO finally called, his voice a mixture of realization and resignation. It's a licensing issue, isn't it? Yes, Thomas. It always was. The emergency board meeting lasted until well after midnight. I knew this because James texted me updates throughout the evening, his messages growing increasingly terse as the hours wore on. Austin still denying responsibility. Legal counsel confirming validity of your contract. CFO calculating potential losses, 7 figures per day. Austin suggesting legal action against you. Legal shot that down immediately. The final text came at 12:43 a.m. Board wants your terms tomorrow. Prepare accordingly. I spent Sunday morning with Patricia, drafting a comprehensive proposal. We were careful not to appear vindictive or opportunistic. This wasn't about extortion, but fair compensation for my intellectual property and professional dignity. The terms were straightforward. 1. Back payment of $750,000 for unlicensed use of my database architecture since termination. 2. A 2-year consulting retainer at $200,000 annually to ensure smooth transition and knowledge transfer. 3. Full ownership of my intellectual property to be formally acknowledged. 4. A public apology from the board for my improper dismissal. This is entirely reasonable, Patricia assured me, reviewing the document. If anything, you're undervaluing your contribution. At 2 p.m., my doorbell rang. I was surprised to find Thomas Lane, NetSpan's CTO, standing on my porch with an uncomfortable expression. The board sent me as their representative, he explained as I invited him in. They felt I might be more welcome than others. We sat in my living room, the tension palpable. Thomas had been with NetSpan almost as long as I had, though we'd never been particularly close. He had always been more focused on hardware infrastructure, while I handled the database architecture. I want to apologize personally, he began, his discomfort evident. I should have stepped in when Austin started pushing for your termination. I knew the value of your work, but I didn't fight hard enough to protect it, or you. I appreciated his candor, but remained guarded. Thank you for that, Thomas. But I assume you're here for more than just an apology. He nodded, reaching into his briefcase to retrieve a folder. The board has reviewed your terms, and they're prepared to accept them, with one modification. He slid a document across the coffee table. They're offering $1, $2 million for the back payment instead of $750,000. Acknowledging that your initial figure was actually quite conservative given the potential damages. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by the increased offer. And the other terms? Accepted as presented, including the public apology. They'd like to issue it tomorrow morning if possible. I took the document, scanning the terms carefully. Why the rush? Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Every minute our systems remain down costs us approximately $40,000 in lost revenue and potential client damages. We've already lost several major accounts, with more threatening to leave if service isn't restored by morning. And Austin? Thomas's expression darkened. The board has asked for his resignation, effective immediately. His decisions created this crisis, and his attempts to blame you afterward only compounded it. James was particularly vocal about holding him accountable. I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and regret. I had never wanted anyone to lose their job. I just wanted proper recognition for my own contributions. "What happens now?" I asked. "If you sign this agreement, I have instructions to immediately implement the licensing key you provide. We can have systems back online within the hour." I studied Thomas's face, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the tension in his shoulders. The entire technical team had likely been working around the clock since Saturday morning. "You haven't slept, have you?" He offered a weary smile. "None of us have. We've been trying every conceivable workaround, but your architecture is remarkably secure." For the first time since my termination, I felt a genuine sense of pride. It was designed that way. Monday morning, I walked into NetSpan headquarters not as a disgraced former employee, but as a valued consultant. The atmosphere was noticeably different. Faces that had avoided eye contact during my humiliating exit now nodded respectfully as I passed. Word travels fast in tech companies, and everyone knew what had happened over the weekend. The systems had been restored Sunday evening after I provided the necessary licensing validation codes. The board's formal apology had been distributed company-wide at 8 a.m., acknowledging my invaluable contributions to NetSpan's core technology and expressing sincere regret for the manner of Ms. Knox's departure. It was carefully worded to avoid admitting legal wrongdoing while still giving me the recognition I deserved. I was escorted to the executive conference room, where the board members were assembled for a special meeting. James greeted me with a firm handshake, guiding me to a seat that had been positioned at the head of the table, a symbolic gesture that wasn't lost on me. "Gentlemen, ladies," James began, addressing the board. "I believe most of you have met Geraldine Knox, the architect of our core database framework, and now our most critical consultant. She has graciously agreed to help us transition to a sustainable knowledge management system over the next 2 years. Several board members nodded, though a few couldn't quite meet my eyes. I recognized them as the ones who had most enthusiastically supported Austin's modernization initiatives without understanding what they were dismantling. "Before we discuss next steps," James continued, "I want to express personally, on behalf of the entire board, our profound apology for what transpired. We failed in our oversight responsibilities and allowed a valuable team member to be mistreated." He turned to me. "Geraldine, the floor is yours." I hadn't prepared a speech, but the words came easily. I dedicated 15 years to building a system that would grow with NetSpan, one that could adapt to changing needs while maintaining rock-solid reliability. I never opposed innovation or modernization. I opposed reckless changes that risk the stability our clients depend on. The board members listened attentively as I continued. "My goal today isn't to dwell on past mistakes, but to establish a path forward. The database architecture needs documentation that others can understand. It needs a succession plan. And yes, it needs updating, but through careful evolution, not revolution." For the next hour, I outlined my vision for NetSpan's technical future. I explained how the existing architecture could be enhanced without being replaced, how younger developers could be trained to maintain and extend it, and how we could incorporate new technologies without abandoning what worked. As the meeting concluded, the CEO, who had wisely remained silent during Austin's campaign against me, approached with a somewhat chastened expression. "We've learned a painful lesson about valuing institutional knowledge," he admitted. "Sometimes the person who's been here the longest isn't an obstacle to progress. They're essential to it." I nodded, appreciating his candor. Experience and innovation aren't mutually exclusive. The best systems combine both. Later that afternoon, I ran into Douglas in the break room. His face lit up when he saw me. "You're back. I mean, I heard you were consulting, but—" "I'm back in a manner of speaking," I confirmed with a smile. "I'll be around to help with the transition." He lowered his voice. "Everyone's talking about what happened. Austin really had no idea about the licensing agreement?" He never bothered to ask. Never took the time to understand the foundation before trying to replace it. Douglas shook his head in disbelief. Wow. I can't imagine being that arrogant. It happens more often than you'd think, I replied. The tech industry sometimes values novelty over substance. New isn't always better. Sometimes it's just new. As I walked back toward my temporary office, I reflected on the events that had brought me here. I hadn't sought revenge so much as recognition. Sometimes the quietest coding contains the most powerful safeguards. 6 months into my consulting agreement, NetSpan was thriving again. Client confidence had been restored, and the technical team was stronger than ever, with a renewed appreciation for documentation and knowledge sharing. Austin's replacement, Vanessa Wright, was a pragmatic leader who valued both innovation and stability, a refreshing change from her predecessor's reckless approach. I had established a comprehensive training program for the younger developers, ensuring that my knowledge wouldn't remain siloed. Douglas had shown particular aptitude for understanding the database architecture, and was emerging as a natural successor to maintain it after my consulting period ended. The board had maintained a respectful distance, allowing me to work without interference while making it clear that my expertise was valued. James occasionally checked in, our old friendship gradually rekindling as we collaborated on long-term strategic planning. On a Wednesday afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor to my office, Patricia from Human Resources, the same woman who had processed my termination papers 6 months earlier. "I brought you something," she said, placing a manila envelope on my desk. "It just came through from legal." Inside was a formal document acknowledging my intellectual property rights to the database architecture, now officially licensed to NetSpan under the terms we had negotiated. It was signed by every board member and included a personal note from the CEO. "With our deepest appreciation for your contributions and our sincere apologies for failing to recognize them sooner." It was more than just a legal document. It was validation of 15 years of work, of countless late nights and weekends sacrificed to build something lasting. I ran my fingers over the embossed company seal, remembering the days when NetSpan was just 3 people in a garage with an ambitious dream. "Thank you, Patricia." She nodded, understanding the weight of the moment. "You know, after everything that happened, a lot of people expected you to be different. Vengeful, maybe." I smiled. I never wanted revenge. I just wanted respect. As Patricia left, I carefully placed the document in my portfolio. The victory wasn't in bringing NetSpan to its knees. It was in helping it stand stronger afterward. 1 year after my public dismissal, I found myself standing at a podium at the Ohio Technology Leadership Summit, delivering a keynote address titled "Building Sustainable Systems: The Human Element in Software Architecture." The irony wasn't lost on me. I had been invited specifically because of how the NetSpan situation had resolved. My case had become something of a cautionary tale in tech management circles, a perfect example of why companies should value their experienced engineers rather than rushing to replace them with younger, supposedly more innovative talent. Several industry publications had covered the story, though NetSpan had wisely refused to comment beyond their public apology. As I concluded my speech, the audience of technology professionals and executives gave an enthusiastic round of applause. During the Q&A session, a young woman raised her hand. "Your database architecture saved NetSpan from collapse, but now you're actively teaching others how to maintain and eventually replace it. Aren't you undermining your own power by sharing your knowledge so freely?" It was an insightful question, one that struck at the heart of what many people misunderstood about my actions. "Knowledge isn't power when it's hoarded," I replied. "It's power when it's properly valued. I never wanted to be irreplaceable. I wanted the systems I built to be understood and appreciated." The true failure at NetSpan wasn't just one director's arrogance. It was a culture that allowed critical knowledge to become mysterious, rather than documented and shared. After the summit, several companies approached me with consulting offers, including 2 of NetSpan's largest competitors. I declined politely, explaining that I was committed to completing my current engagement. The truth was more nuanced. I had no desire to leverage Netspan's crisis for personal gain. My goal had never been to maximize profit, but to restore professional dignity. That evening, I received an email from Vanessa Wright with a simple subject line: "Thank you for rebuilding bridges instead of burning them." As I reflected on my journey from humiliation to vindication, I realized that the most satisfying revenge wasn't destruction, but creation, building a legacy that would outlast both crisis and triumph.